tried to triage this list last night before coming into this. I may juggle a few things sort of on the fly. Let's start with new contributors. Is there anyone who is new or attending the meeting for the first or second
time? Yes, I am new to the call. My name is Yasmir Diaz, and I work for Ultimate Software. And I just wanted to be a fly in the wall. I would love to start a SIG group inside of our four docs inside of our company. So I just wanted to learn and absorb.
Awesome. Well, welcome, Ms. Mary. And to see Ian is new as well. So Ian, I think, is joining us from Korea. For Ian, are you part of the translation team efforts for Kubernetes Docs in Korea?
Yes. Yeah, I'm currently the coordinator for translating Kubernetes, not only for website, but also some Kubectl on dashboard. And also that I contribute a lot on OpenStack translation team.
Excellent. Well, welcome. We're so glad to have you. All right. Let's talk about the PR Wrangler queue. I did it last week. We need someone to wrangle PRs this week and next week. I will just to level expectations. Every PR that's in the queue right now seems like it's kind of a monster. There are a lot of PRs in flight, and the ones that have not yet been triaged. There seem to be very few simple ones. So heads up that this is kind of it's a little more intensive role. If you only have a certain amount of time, you may get through very few PRs this week. So if there is someone who is able to do a Wrangler shift this week, or sign up for next week, or even beyond that, I would say we need it, so please sign up.
I can do it for this week, Zach. I might not get through a whole lot of them, but I haven't done it yet for general PRs. So
awesome.
I'm already in there all over the 111 ones, so I might as well.
Sure. Are you going to have time with 111?
I mean, why not? It's just time, right? We have been thin on the ground for volunteers, so I might as well put my hand up.
And I've been following Misty on a subset of the 111 PRs, so you know which ones to toss my way if they're not already tossed. And those,
I feel like even if you're not in the rotation, if anybody sees like a PR that catches their attention, if you've started reviewing it, I probably won't like follow on and keep reviewing with you. So I think we can probably still do some teamwork even if there's somebody on the hook.
Agreed. I'm going to keep going this week as well, just because the queue is so large. I feel like if without multiple people on it this week, it might get out of control. So I'm going to stay on PR wrangling this week, and Misty, we can work together on getting those wrangled.
And just a reminder that not just for 111, but for master also, if it relates to KubeADM and it's not already assigned to me, that the team is being pretty good about assigning me right out of the gate. But if it happens to touch that stuff, just toss it my way.
Okay. Thank you. So let's get...
Sorry, just one more heads up there. There will be a clutch of KubeADM related new PRs as of tomorrow afternoon, Thursday, Friday. I will be shepherding those through, though. So just so you know, there might be a bit of burgeoning in the queue, but that's a known issue already and accounted for. And that stuff, people want to get in for 111, so it needs to. I'll be moving on it pronto.
Okay. So let's talk about approvers for individual files. So this is an issue that came up over the past week, where SIG cluster lifecycle, I think, looked at front matter for an individual set of files that's kind of unique, and they added themselves to a list. There's in the top level of K website, there's a file called owners sub aliases, and SIG cluster lifecycle very helpfully updated that And then they updated some approver information for individual files in K website that listed them as approvers. And this is problematic because it looks on its surface like SIG cluster lifecycle might be appearing to try and bypass the SIG docs review process, because approvers is a magic word now with Blunderbuss. But what I think happened is that if you look back in the history of the repo, approvers was not always a magic word. And it was in the front matter for several files. If you look through like Chinese content, which is a couple of releases early to where we are right now, you can see files with approvers in the front matter as pre-Hugo files all over the place. So I don't think that SIG cluster lifecycle was trying to stage a coup against the SIG docs review process. I think that they were acting with the best of intention and just did not connect that approver is a magic word that grants them special powers. So I guess I want to be really clear that I think we're all good here. I think that we can give feedback about this particular PR 8506 and say, thank you for updating your info, but please don't bypass the SIG docs review process. And I think they're totally open to hearing that. But I also want to be clear that there is no bypassing the SIG docs review process, except for very specific cases. Those are case studies and the blog, and there are individual owners files for those particular areas that the owners are well aware of. So I think that's the context. The short takeaway is please don't add individual file owners or file level individual owners to files in K website. Does anyone have any questions about that? Any concerns? Steve?
So I'm not.
Steve, you are muted.
Sorry.
So the owner's file is not the problem. The problem is the approvers designation. And in that same file or in the front matter, it's fine to list people as reviewers. So that's the message I think we should send to them in that PR, is just change what you've done here to reviewers. That'll help us get a good choice of a tech reviewer and a good recommendation for a tech reviewer or additional doc reviewer, but it won't grant that power that an approver has.
Sure, and it will streamline the review process for anybody who's not, well, it'll just make it easy. So Misty, you had specific concerns around this?
I don't have any concerns. What I just have is a comment that this should go in the contributor docs that I'm working on. So it's just a reminder to me that like these things should be defined clearly as to what they mean. It seems to me that it would be amazing if these weren't buried in individual files. It seems maybe hard to maintain, but I guess they're search and replace.
Sure, and there are ways to make it more visible at the top level, maybe like in owner sub-aliases, because it's possible to add reviewers there. So let's explore best practices around maximizing visibility for reviewers, but agreed, let's make sure that this gets into the contributors guide.
And we also have edit privileges for those files in that PR, so we should just go ahead and change that to reviewers instead of approvers, and then just let them know that we made that change.
That's totally reasonable. Okay. I'm
going to take this as a work item in the next couple of weeks to go through and seek out all the places where we still have approvers listed and change them to reviewers.
Remaining legacy approvers and change to reviewers. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
So Misty, you have a note about another Slack query from someone, actually for Korean translation, Misty, oh, never mind. So Ian, are you the point contact for Korean translation?
Yes, for Korean translation, we formed a team, so that we started to divide. For example, we start to translate mini kube part, tutorial part, but other guys start from some basic tutorial part and so on.
So if someone contacts us and they're interested, if someone is interested in participating in Korean translation, can we direct them to you?
Yes, or just please redirect to Kubernetes Docs KO channel, Slack channel, and then
Excellent.
it will be very great. Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask which repo you're doing your translations in right now?
Currently that we use iLink. I've just created a simple organization called K8s-KR. But yeah.
Because I think we should open up a repo in the Kubernetes org for you to do that. Because the Chinese translation team has one that's like Kubernetes-docs-cn. So
yeah, it would be very great. Yeah, if Docs Sig would open a repository for Korean team. Yeah,
absolutely. I will take that on and make sure that you get a dedicated repository, Ian,
yes.
within the Kubernetes organization.
Yes, thanks a lot. Yeah, that would be very great.
And then we should create some guidelines for like how the structure should be, because you should probably have a branch for each version. Because so we ran into this for the Chinese translation team, right?
Sure. Andrew, I'm wondering if we can take this on offline, just because we have a lot to get through.
So hi, this is Matt Farina. Just real quick on that. Could it get documented? Because there's more people than just Ian who want to do this. And there's already a first pull request on adding Korean translations. And it is blocked right now on documentation of how do we handle internationalization. And so if there were some clear guidelines, that would probably help.
Yeah, I'll write those up.
Thank you. I'm sorry to cut it's a worthwhile discussion. I'm sorry to cut it short. We just have to move on. So Jennifer and Steve, and we've had quite a bit of discussion this past week about kubeadm and updating the generation instructions for it. So I wonder, Jennifer and Steve, if you would like to talk a little bit about about getting our doc generation instructions current for a post-Hugo world.
So I was planning to do that. Jennifer, are you already doing that, or would it be okay if I just did it?
If you're good to go with it, that would be great. I chatted with Chimeng last night. DM. I'm sorry, I probably should have put that in a public channel, but I can copy it to you. Basically, everything to generate all of the generated bits and pieces now lives in Kubernetes Incubator reference docs. Right? We aren't dependent on hack generate docs script anymore at all.
For kubeadmin?
No, for everything.
This is news to me. I didn't know about that.
Take a look at the work that Chimeng checked in with that one PR that looked enormous. I mean, we don't have to. We can continue to generate the kubectl and API ref docs, using the stuff that calls hack generate docs. But I think that what Chimeng has put together is considerably more elegant and easier to use. That said, it's not documented, and the make file isn't updated to include all the docs. There's some other problems with it too. I don't have to take up this meeting. I know we're on time, Zach, but I guess the useful thing for the group to know, and then Steve, you and I should probably chat this afternoon if you've got time. I mean, afternoon Eastern time. And I can fill you in on what Chimeng told me, but he said that he would update I told him to put it wherever. I don't know whether he was planning to put it in the website repo or in the README for the reference docs in Kubernetes Incubator, but he said he would get the whole thing documented this week. From what I can tell, there's not anything that is Hugo dependent, but I'm not sure about that.
So is he planning to write a document that says, here's how to generate the kubeadmin ref docs?
Yes, but what he did for right now, if you take a look at the code that he wrote, it's all written in Go now. There's no more shell scripts. And it's one file, it's one file to call to generate all of basically everything. So I said, look, especially for kubeadm, we need to be able to generate those separately. And that's a separate item in the agenda, so I won't go there yet. But I did call that to his attention. That said, you know, I mean, if I can figure out how to adjust what's in there to get just KubeADM out, I'm sure anybody else who needed to could, but it still should be better documented, and it should be pulled out because it needs to be run. It is going to need to be run separately on a regular basis.
Well, and I think we still ought to have separate topics for how to generate the Kubernetes commands, how to generate the Federation ref docs, how to generate the kube control commands, and how to generate the Kubernetes API ref docs. Even if it's all done by a more unified tool set, I think someone might want to know, how do I do this one thing?
Right, exactly. I mean, my focus is primarily KubeADM right now, but
Yeah.
I absolutely agree. And some things might need to get updated on a basis.
So Jennifer, can I ask, maybe in the agenda, can you provide a link to the Kubernetes incubator to the just for easy reference?
Yes, will do.
Thank you very much.
And
So,
Steve, you and I can chat separately and report back to y'all.
sounds good. Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Yes, thank you very much. Let's see. Would it be, let's see, what is today? Today is the 5th. Should we follow up again on the 12th, or is that too soon? 12th, 19th?
Yeah, we should do that.
We should definitely follow up by the 12th. I let Chiming know that it's fairly urgent because next Monday's the Docs PR's date,
Right.
and we need to have this stuff solid by then.
Okay. And if there's anything that I can help with in that process, please let me know. I am happy. I am happy to support whatever. If there's any sort of bulk work or testing that needs to happen along with that, I'm happy to contribute.
So one last question. What we were talking about was documenting the process of generating the ref docs. But Jennifer, what about generating the ref docs and getting them into the release 1.11? Are you doing that?
No, and that no, I'm not doing that either. And that's something that I still need clarification on here because the we actually need to update that script in the repository, right, to copy from different locations or to copy different sets of files. I'm not completely clear on this because I haven't had time to look at it.
So who's going to actually generate ref docs and get them into the 1.11 branch?
That's a great
Are we going to need to walk Misty through that?
Sorry, I totally wasn't paying attention.
I think if nobody's doing it, I should probably be the one to coordinate that.
Yes, Steve is the one with experience who understands where all the bodies are buried. If you're willing, Steve.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I'd like to follow along more closely so that, you know, bus factor, et cetera, and also because I'm curious and I've been poking around in the files. But yeah, you're definitely the person to take lead on that.
Yeah, I would like to follow along too.
And I misspoke a little bit about how much is munged into a single file. Some things are pulled out into separate directories, but you'll see that when you look in the recall.
Okay, yeah.
Awesome. All right, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's move on to, let's see, following up on fixing broken links. I have a note from last week saying Misty and Zach Arnold, you take a look at automating checks for broken links and how to perform regular maintenance. Any updates there? Should we defer?
I'm a little bummed out that it's actually been a week since I said that because I haven't even had a single brain cycle to think about it yet.
So I will mark that we're going to defer this to at least 6/12, and given the reality of 1.11, probably the 19th.
So DockerCon's coming up next week, and I'm going, so I will probably be a little bit distracted, if not absent from the meeting, because I think DockerCon is Tuesday and Wednesday.
Sure. Okay, let's see. But just to note that we still have, I think, a large number of broken links. And to be honest, I have been I've been chiseling away at the PR queue, but there could very well be fixes to a lot of broken links that I just have not seen yet. So let's just mark that this is still outstanding work, and revisit it in a week.
I'll put it in my inbox, which becomes my to-do list, and I'll at least be able to take a look at it sometime before our next meeting and have something to chat about.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. Okay, let's talk briefly about the KubeCon Shanghai. So the CNCF has asked us to put together a doc sprint specifically for KubeCon Shanghai. I'm just curious whether anyone right now is planning to go. Is anyone planning to go to Shanghai? Brad, you are going?
I was considering it, but
yeah.
it may, that is sort of up in the air right now.
Sure, this is sort of on the fence there. Anyone else? So right now it just looks like Brad is definite, and Andrew and maybe some Google folks are a maybe.
Yeah. I'll be there organizing the new contributor summit. We're obviously looking for a translation-oriented doc sprint as well. So if somebody is interested in organizing that and is limited by funding, funding can be available.
Indeed.
If they're really excited about it, can we have better coordination than we did at Copenhagen?
I think that is a totally valid question.
Like perhaps something that's better than say like hastily designed and a back room.
Well, what was the problem with Copenhagen? We got a lot done in Copenhagen.
Copenhagen.
We did succeed, but I do think being scheduled alongside the developer summit without like a clear request that other people outside the dev summit the contributor summit could attend.
And being sequestered away from the rest of the contributors.
And also the almost total lack of signage for finding the place.
Yeah.
People got lost.
So we can summarize this by saying that make sure that we're more integrated into the contributor experience. I think that's a very reasonable request.
Sure.
And
Burkus, you were going to say something?
Well, go ahead.
Just that I don't intend to accept not finding out where our rooms are until the day of the event this time around, which was a big part of the problem with Copenhagen.
Cheers.
So does anybody remember KubeCon Austin, where as part of the registration process and you had the list of options, we were, the doc sprint was listed as a free option, and I think that got us some people. And then I think we dropped that somehow as we got more into the contributor stuff, that nice part of that registration flow for the whole big conference, that was really cool. Oh, hey, there's a doc sprint. Hey, and a description.
So Brad, I'm so sorry. This is a valuable discussion, but let's continue line. We gotta, I want to get through at least the front part of I've got 3 minutes before I've got to go to the CNCF all hands, and I want to get through this next item.
Sorry.
So I'm sorry to get you off.
Sorry.
That's all good. I have an item to follow up on from last week about whether or not we need to do another post-Hugo bug bash. So Andrew and we haven't had a chance to talk about how to flag issues for Bjorn Erik Pedersen or Steve Francia and separate out Hugo-related issues into nice buckets that would play well with another sprint. But we have a meeting scheduled to do that. So Andrew and I are going to take time. I think when did we schedule that? Anyway, it's on my calendar, which is why I don't know it in my head. Andrew and I are going to go through and take a look at the post-Hugo issues that are remaining. And my suspicion is that, yes, we will have enough material to do another solid post-Hugo bash. So Andrew and I will come back with specifics next week.
Yeah, I think the meeting's later today.
and we will have more information for you in the weekly meeting next week. This is where I'm going to hand it over to Jared to lead the rest of the meeting. Thank you very much, and I'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Hello. All right. We'll so follow up on generated docs and release PRs. Misty, did you want to chat about that? Or Jennifer and Misty? We'll start with Jennifer. You're up first.
So up until 111, generating docs for the docs site has been a one-time thing toward the end of the release cycle. It turns out that when there are but the KubeADM docs are built a little bit differently from all the other docs. They include the manually created files contain include statements that pull in content from generated docs. This means that if there's a new command with a new generated doc and a new include statement, we need to include at least a placeholder, and I would argue ideally the actual generated file itself or the docs build breaks. Yeah, we found this out the hard way. Right now, because the process of generating the KubeADM docs is still a bit mysterious to pretty much everybody except the person who originally developed it, we have placeholder files in there to fix the build breaks. But I think it's worth discussing getting the actual generated files in for review together with their parent manual files. And Misty had some nice ideas about how to programmatically make sure that those files don't get edited. In fact, possibly even not checking them in, but waiting until the very end of the release cycle when the rest of the generated docs get checked in, but at least having them available for review. I guess they would have to be checked in though, because otherwise the build would break, so never mind that, but making sure that they're not modified.
Sounds good to me. Misty, you had a comment on that? Misty, you're muted. Nope. Misty, are you? Okay. All right. Well, we can't hear you, Misty, so we're.
I don't know. Maybe you'll have to do it because it's not.
I'm trying, but like I don't think.
Okay, we can hear Neha just fine, but we can't hear Misty.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, Misty, do you want to speak into Neha's laptop? Or not? Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to move on because I can't hear any of you.
So one comment on that, what Jennifer just said about arranging for those generated KubeAdmin files to not be, to check and make sure they're not manually edited, would apply to all of our generated ref docs.
Yes.
We could have that.
It came up in this context though, because this is atypical in that we might wind up with pull requests sort of earlier in the release cycle as part of something that should have changed files in it also, right? Things that we can reasonably sort of edit and expect people to add commits to. So that's what makes it a little bit different. But yes, the check should definitely be for any of them.
Okay.
And it shouldn't be hard to do either because it involves the contents of entire directories. It's not, the generated docs all live in their own directories in the tree. So it's not like we have to go through and specify individual files.
Okay. Jennifer, maybe you and Misty, you had a comment on this, and then maybe Jennifer, you and Misty can figure out a solution and bring it to our next meeting. Misty, did you have a comment?
No.
Okay.
We just had to like refix our meeting because Andrew had to leave.
Oh, no worries. Okay, so I'll leave it, Misty, I'll leave it to you and Jennifer to suss out a solution. It sounds like we've got some options, but I'll leave it up to you two to decide what our next steps are.
Yeah, we have an acceptable workaround in place for now. This is something that I see as need to have down the road, not must have immediately, given how booked we all are.
Sounds good. Next item, Misty, Git class.
So I think that's probably referring to the idea that I had to do a Git office hours. And I didn't really anticipate doing a class. But I'm happy to do that probably after 111. I think all the cute stuff that I thought that might be cool to do sort of got preempted by 111. So, I mean, the thing about office hours.
Welcome to the release team.
Yeah, exactly. Everything, all the kinds of questions that people usually have with Git are very individualized and situation specific. So I think an office hours format with maybe a way to record lessons learned somehow is probably the better way to go instead of trying to do group stuff.
Yeah, I mean, how many people here would like it? I think the class idea was tossed out as an idea, but I don't know how many people would be interested in doing it.
There's something nice to hear when somebody's an expert at Git and then kind of goes through an overview of the material and how it works and you can go back a couple and you know, a class is always really kind of helpful. Office hours are good, but then you only get like bits and pieces. I mean, if there's any way to put a little bit of a class together, that would be really cool. I mean, everybody always likes, I mean, we all have our tricks and can hobble through, and I know how to rebase and deal with merge conflicts, but you know, it's always neat when somebody who's an expert at Git kind of can help you to really understand how it works. Does that make sense, Jared?
It makes sense to me. It makes sense to me. I feel like for that kind of thing, there are a ton of resources out there, and there are professional Git classes that you can take, and I won't be able to capture those things. My experience with coming from zero to being pretty much an expert on Git now is that I had to learn it in bites, and I had to adjust my mental map as I went along. Everything started out being magical commands for me, just like it does for everybody else, and it took me time and effort in solving specific tasks to get the mental map right, and I think that's the way that most people learn. So if you want to take a Git class or you want to read a book, or GitHub has actually pretty good documentation themselves, so I would encourage people to check that stuff out, and then when you run into specific problems, ask me for help and we can work through the specific problems, and then over time we will all get better at it. That's sort of the way that I like to do it, but I'm open to suggestions.
I think, I don't think this is a high priority. I think it'd be useful to have at least like a one-pager or like maybe a short, max 20-minute video of like, you're a new contributor. How do you use Git without destroying everybody else's work? I think that would be really useful, just to, for new contributors to know what they're doing and not be dangerous.
So I'm covering really, really specific advice like that in the contributor's guide.
I think as long as that covers that, that's great.
Here's the command you would use to do this specific thing that I'm showing you how to do. I'm covering that, and I'm covering a lot of how to do stuff in the GitHub UI, which is going to be much more palatable to new contributors as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And then if people just know that they can come to you if they have specific Git questions that are advanced topics, I think that would be useful too. So, I guess it's not a thing. Brad, did you want to talk about the Hugo Codebase review?
What we had talked about last week was Bjorn taking us through just sort of the lay of the land. For example, there's a lot of the nested templates, right? The hierarchy of templates, and kind of taking us through the code and how it worked was the ask. I don't know if Zach was able to talk to Bjorn or not, but that was kind of something I think on the last week we all felt was really helpful, if he would take some time to kind of say, hey, here's how I structured this. Here's how Hugo does all these things, and help us all to learn the flow. Because otherwise you're kind of going through it yourself, trying to understand the Hugo docs are pretty good. I went and learned it. but you know, understanding how Bjorn designed it, I thought would really help everybody, because we feel like he went off and did this, and then it's kind of gotten thrown over the wall, and now we got to figure it out. And some things are easy, we figure it out, and you know, Misty figured some stuff out, but some things it might be good to have him kind of just go through like a, hey, here's what I did, and here's how this is all structured kind of thing.
Yeah, I know that there's some chat between Zach and Bep about, well, one bringing Bep back for like another contract to fix and add some tooling to the site. I think my experience with contractors is that when they're not being paid anymore, they tend to be far less responsive
Yeah,
to things like this.
Oh yeah.
So I think it would be nice to get a walkthrough from Bep, but I think there'll be some difficulty in scheduling it. For him, it's like that project is over.
So he's not on. We're not paying him anymore.
Well, I don't know. That's a question for Zach.
Because I thought we had some like bigger bugs that we were hoping that he would fix. Because the last week's discussion was, hey, some of these are, we didn't write the Hugo stuff, and it's not an easy one.
Yeah, so I think that's so you're asking a sort of a complicated question, and I'm trying to be like very specific. I was in here last week too. I know that Zach and Bep are talking about fixing those issues. I don't know what the process is, so Zach's gonna have to come back and sort of talk about that at next week's meeting, or feel free to reach out to him on Slack. I do know that Bep is available to fix some of these, but I don't know like what their contract was and what the specifics were.
Okay.
So
we'll have to follow up with Zach, I guess.
Yeah.
No, that's okay.
But I do think your suggestion is great. I think we should do that. And Andrew, it looks like you have a very specific question, and I don't know the answer to that. So does anybody else know the answer to Andrew's question? No. Okay. I can also just loop Andrew in on an email with Beth to get that question answered. So I'll sync up with him offline on that. Brad, feedback on blog.
Oh, I'll take care of that after this. I forgot. I got to just file an issue on that. That was easy. Just to file an issue. That was my to-do. My bad. I'll do that after this meeting.
Cool. Thanks.
Sure.
Ian, Korean translation status.
Yes. So yeah, this is the pull request for initial documentation of translation from Korean team. Yeah, about 3 to 5 Korean members contributed, and we reviewed each other. We had peer reviews, so it would be great if some SIG members would kindly review this pull request.
Okay, excellent. And we can definitely provide review. Is there somebody here that can provide a review? Maybe we should ask Andrew, since he's leading the translation effort. Does that make sense? Neha and Misty, Steve?
Yeah, Andrew needs to be the one to chime in on this. This looks like a PR where English has been translated to Korean. Is that correct? Yeah. So
yeah.
What would we, I mean, how could we review that if we don't know Korean?
Yeah, so then, so initially, one guy made a pull request, so there were other translators in Korean team, so that we had peer reviews. And then now, we all think that this pull request, a Korean translation is fine, but I would like to request some reviews. For example, some general structure or some what should we do? Should Korean team more do?
Okay, yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, so I'll sync with Andrew and ask him to review. And Josh Burkus, PRs since March. Need for docs.
I didn't actually put that on the agenda. Maybe Zach Arnold
I did for you. Yeah, sorry. I'm happy to introduce it unless you want to chat about it.
Well, I'm actually kind of leaving that up to the docs folks on the release team.
Okay.
I was just dialed in here. Basically what it is, and this is something to think about for a future topic, and I put it in the retro for 111, which is we have a lot of things, PRs that go in that don't rise to the level of tracked feature. Like they don't rise to the level of having, entry in the features repo, et cetera. But nevertheless require a docs change. And we don't really have any good way of keeping track of those items to make sure that they get a docs change. I mean, like an example is we have a PR that adds one field to an API, right? That requires a docs change somewhere. But without somebody tracking it, it may not get it. And there isn't really a process for that. And so, as far as 111, is concerned, that means that we have to do this huge retro effort, looking over basically every PR that went into 111, trying to figure out whether that thing needed docs, and if it needed docs, whether or not it got them. Which is obviously going to be a very lossy process. I've already asked Misty and Zach, et cetera, to do what they can on that. But one of the things to think about for 112 in the future is there a better way to do this?
I thought this was built into the Kubernetes pull request system where there was a needs docs field.
No,
there
is nobody's using it.
Yep, that's release notes only.
Oh, okay, right. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, and there is some correlation of if something needs a release note, that there's some correlation that mostly things that need docs are also going to need release notes. And so we can filter out the PRs that went in based on whether or not they got a release note. But again, there's no way to connect that to the website PR except manually.
So I can think of a potential way using mechanisms that already exist in GitHub. The Kubernetes features PRs already seem to have a format about them. So we could require that if it needs docs, then the feature owner has to have a link to a docs PR at some point in the feature. Like they add it to the first field after when they raise the PR, which would then connect the two PRs or the issue or whatever in GitHub's way. Like if you link to an external issue or PR, then it pings both. They already have to do that for the feature, the code, right? They already have to put the code PRs as part of their feature PR.
Yeah, but GitHub doesn't link that for us. We do it manually via a spreadsheet.
It should link it for you if you have mentioned the entire URL of the PR.
Right, but I'm saying the linkage is not something that's trackable. Links don't exist as first-class objects in GitHub.
Yeah, I guess.
It's basically a comment that happens to have a URL in it.
What would be a perfect world for you? What would that look like?
Well, the previous projects I worked on, so there's a couple of things there. One is a behavioral thing, which is that currently for the way that we accept features and changes in Kubernetes is people write the code first and then they write the docs later on. So in a perfect world, the docs would have to come with the code. But that requires a massive behavioral change across Kubernetes.
And it's not enforceable because they're in separate repos.
Well, it would be enforceable because you could require somebody to have at least the link in the PR, which would at least, even if we had to track it manually, the information would be easier to find.
Yeah.
But that's certainly not happening for 111, and I'm fairly dubious about getting people to accept that across the project overall, because that sort of behavior pattern is already set. So I guess the second way would be Yeah, I don't know. A lot of this ends up tying into us having really poor instrumentation on PRs in general, which is due to GitHub's limitations. Which is why I'm looking for creative ideas here. Because the obvious ideas, which is we ought to have some system that tracks each PR that goes in, allows us to flag whether or not that thing needs docs, allows us to then request docs from the PR author in some automated fashion and track that, is something that would be lovely to have, but will be very difficult to construct.
If there are tags that people are not currently using, it seems like there are other parts of Prow that people are using very consistently. So it would be interesting to understand what would be the hook to make people use something consistently. Like even if we expand it out, if needs docs right now means needs release notes, then it should probably be called needs release notes, and there should be something else that's like needs API update or like needs formal documentation or something. Like maybe it's not granular enough.
Yeah, well, the other problem is that it kind of needs to be interactive, right? Because we need a way. Well, I guess it would be a lot like might work a lot like the release notes, which is we have the needs release notes, doesn't need release notes, but with the understanding that there's already some problems with the release notes mechanism. In that,
could we potentially piggyback off of the mechanism the owner's file possesses right now? Because not every change in PR is going to require documentation. But let's say certain packages are sensitive enough, like API changes or particular areas of the code base that would require a documentation update if they had it. Could we use a similar mechanism that the owner's file does that would require an approval from an owner for a code change? The same thing has to happen for a docs. Like when a change is requested on this particular thing, it needs docs. Otherwise, it's fine.
I think another part of the confusion is that if the docs that are required are API docs, they're also not going to be in the docs repo. They're going to be in with the code. So like that's an extra level of granularity that maybe people aren't thinking about right now that we make it possible to think about.
And I may have been not very clear. I suppose what I meant was like if a change goes into the code base in a particular package, that will end up affecting, let's say, a kube control command, as far as the number of flags you can pass, or what the flag order, or not order, but what the flag parameters are that can be passed to it. In that particular case, that would definitely trigger a docs update. And so inside of the kubectl subfolder inside of the repo, inside of a specific package, there could be a flag either inside of the owner's file or a separate file that's just all caps docs. And basically Prow or whatever the amazing new tool is that we have that does PR management inside of GitHub will have a label that's set that's needs docs on any time that there's a pull request where code changes inside of a package that would eventually affect or impact the operation of a cluster. I think that was the most specific definition I could give, but tell me if I was unclear.
It's an interesting idea. I am probably too new to know how well it would work, but I will say that when I've worked with other pieces of software where APIs were generated from code, quite often, even though that is technically documentation, most of the time the docs team was not involved in any way, shape, or form with like reviewing the PR or even knowing that the PR existed to update the API. So like that's sort of a different kind of docs to me than the kind of docs that we're actually responsible for. But Josh needs to track all of it, so he's even got a bigger problem. So I guess I'm just throwing more problems at you instead of helping. But
so I suspect that Steve can speak better to this than I can, and I might be falling down the rabbit hole of your examples, Zach, but both of them are in fact covered by the generated docs. kubectl, anything that gets added to kubectl, that stuff is automatically generated and shows up in the admittedly unlovely reference docs for kubectl. Ditto the API reference docs. Now, that's not always sufficient, but at the level of granularity that we seem to be talking about, and this is true for a whole lot of other bits and pieces of Kubernetes as well, right? Generate docs for, well, you've already heard me talk too much about KubeADM. We generate docs for KubeAPI iServer, for a whole bunch of other command line tools. And all of the content for those docs lives in the Kubernetes repository. Yes, it would be lovely if we could generate those docs on the early side and review infelicitous strings and actually get pull requests in KK merged so that we can fix the strings. We have that workflow as an option, but it's a crapshoot whether those PRs actually get any attention. So I guess I need to hear a use case that's not about generated ref docs for all of these different bits and pieces. I believe that such cases exist. Yeah, I'll stop there.
I'm glad you asked. So Josh has done a wonderful thing for us and has actually gone through and looked at PRs on KK. I just popped one of them into the chat window, and this is an example of a pull request that that trips the internal Burkus alarm that says this should have some documentation around it.
Yeah. The problem with that tracking is that currently takes me about 3 hours a day, every day, in order to have that level of tracking. So I've only been doing it for the last week and a half. So it's not a sustainable approach for this in the future.
Right. So, and definitely thank you for all that and hard work that you've been doing. So I suppose, Jennifer, to kind of address your specificity concern, I don't actually know anything about this feature. I'm sure I could probably go read through it really quickly. But the suggestion that I was making is, for example, a lot of this changed inside of the code that was changed in this was in various packages across the entire repo. It could be the case that an owner's file would either include an entry for if something changes inside of this whole package and any related sub-packages, it will need documentation. In which case, that constraint could be satisfied by simply pasting in a link as a comment in the PR that is a link to Kubernetes website or whatever other documentation system we have at the time for a PR that also updates some other mechanism. That was my suggestion for out. And then in that particular case, then Josh doesn't have to go through and look at every single pull request to make sure that it should or should not have some documentation. Probably a bigger discussion, but just wanted to thank and commend Josh for bringing that up and something that we could definitely consider as a SIG.
Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of open questions, so we'll definitely come back to this. Zach, you had comments about working weekends.
Excellent introduction. I definitely am going to get a ton of support after saying that. Open source project. We're all volunteers, man. No, so
you may work weekends. You have our permission.
So I am a software engineer for my company. I do not get paid to do Kubernetes, though that would be incredible. Most of my contributions that don't involve meetings during the day have to come on weekends or at night. And generally I'm too tired at night. So I was thinking, I was like, well, it was a lot of fun. The doc sprint that we did at KubeCon Copenhagen, I thought that was a blast. So I thought in order to sort of increase our throughput or just, I don't know, have a good time as a SIG, it could be fun, and I'd be willing to host the first few, to have sort of like a distributed doc sprint where we have like a 2-hour stretch or a 3-hour stretch on a weekend day, not super often, but as a totally volunteer, and obviously stagger and vary the time so that we can engage different time zones in the effort, but then we could kind of all collaborate, get on the same page with whoever's actually there at the sprint, and move significant pieces of the K website repo forward that we've been languishing on, or actually do those things where we're like, well, these would be nice to have projects. So that would be a perfect time to engage in something like that. So that was a suggestion. I know I super enjoy working in a group of people. It was awesome to meet Jared and the gang in Copenhagen. That was a lot of fun. So just, I guess, thoughts around that, if you guys think that would be useful or helpful. Otherwise, I'll shut up and go back to mine.
So Zach, maybe like a smaller version of that I know, like I did for just out of the blue for Steve Perry one weekend when he had like a plethora of PRs fixing all kinds of doc links. Yes, a plethora. I think that's the right word. Maybe having, somebody on call to do reviews. So like, I was able to speed a lot of things up because I spent a Saturday night doing a whole bunch of reviews for them. So I don't know if there's a model like that where you're like, hey, could anybody, I got a whole bunch of stuff I got to get done. And, is there anybody who could spend some time, say Saturday night, being the on-call review person? I don't know if you remember that, Steve, but that kind of worked really well. It wasn't anything we planned. I just knew we had a ton of stuff to review and I felt really guilty. So I was sitting in front of that computer on a Saturday night. Okay, no comments about my social life. But I don't know, Steve, if you wanted to comment, but it worked really well. I know that's kind of like a smaller version of what you're saying, but maybe that suffices if you can't motivate the troops here to spend their Saturday evenings with you, Zach.
So I thank you for that. That it did work really well, and thank you. In general, I don't want to condone working on weekends, and I'm trying to train myself to not. So I don't have a strong feeling one way or the other on this question of creating opportunities for people to work on weekends. I think it's a fine idea for those who would like to do it. I think that'd be fine.
I think from my managerial standpoint, I think if there's like a group project to do something on a weekend that's a sprint, and folks from Google want to participate, then awesome. Let me know so that we can sort of like figure out how to credit you that time back, because I actually am really committed to people not overextending themselves and actually having a good work-life balance. So, and we do get paid to work on Kubernetes. That makes things a little different. So I support it, but there's some boundary conditions I have around it.
Totally.
Yep.
I don't think I'm going to get much moving here soon. It'll probably be a month or two before we get that. And it may even be after Write the Docs Cincinnati. But just wanted to kick the ball around, see if anyone wanted to pass it back, because I think it would be a perfect way to gain a little bit of visibility as a SIG. Obviously, docs are some of the most important things Kubernetes. I can't tell you how many nightmarish scenarios I've managed to get out of in our company in production because of Kubernetes.io. So it's been an invaluable resource for us. And I think, I do think that it would help in engaging, for example, new contributors. They would be like, oh, okay, well, this seems like a bear to approach from the outside. So maybe if I just spent 3 hours with someone who knows what they're doing, that could be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It was a thought.
For what it's worth, the Fedora project does these, and they're pretty successful.
Sweet. Well, probably that's gonna, again, another longer discussion, and I'll probably talk with Zach Corlesson to actually coordinate this. But if there's general, I guess, not open opposition to the idea, then I might try one.
Yeah, and I know that there's going to be a sprint of the Cincinnati Write the Docs, but I don't have the details on that. I just know it's brewing in some people's minds. So.
Okay.
But with that, we are over time. So thank you everyone for attending. And if you have any follow-up discussions that you'd like to have, feel free to have them on the Slack channel. And I will see you all in a week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.